If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? You cannot serve God and wealth. Well, here I am again, getting to preach on one of the least favorite topics the lectionary presents to us: money. But before you groan, take heart, because Jesus may be up to something just a little bit different today. And it's really a good thing, too, because talking about money seems kind of weird for me. I was brought up to believe that money is personal, it's a private thing, it's no one's business. Polite people don't talk about money. It just isn't done. Is this a generational thing? Can you all identify with that kind of weird feeling when we talk money? In fact, in my household, as I was growing up, I had no idea how much my father made. I had no idea how much the house cost. And in fact, there was no discussion about finances ever in my house. And my father was an accountant. But the reality is, our human reality, is that money, or something like it, plays a huge role in all of our lives. We humans have always needed to, something like to trade for things that sustain life, food, shelter, that sort of thing. We always needed to be able to even trade for something that will make us comfortable, convenient, perhaps safe and healthier. It's just a little weird that we don't like to talk about it, especially since we derive so much of our identity from the money that we have and spend, or the money that we don't have and need. I mean, have you ever noticed that in the church, there's just one or two times that we ever even mention money? When we balance the budget, or we make the budget and approve it, or when we want something special. It's as if there's this enormous gap between our faith and our everyday lives. Our relationship with wealth and with money and possessions, it's complicated. And through the parables that Dr. Luke presents for us this year particularly, relates for us what I'm pretty sure that Jesus is saying to us as he tries to close that gap. You may remember just a few weeks ago, you heard a story about money and possessions through the lens of death, another one of my favorite topics. The one about the rich man who wanted to build more barns in which to store all of his excess harvest. Do you remember that? And just as he hatched his plan to increase his storage capacity, Jesus comes around and says, "You knucklehead." Actually, he calls him a fool, huh? Because this very day your life is going to be demanded of you. Certainly, this was a reality check for all of us who keep forgetting somehow that no matter how much money we make, no matter how much we have, no matter how big our houses are or small, we can't take any of it with us. Earthly death will happen. Well, again today, we hear a story about yet another man, a rich man, and his money. And it goes something like this. Apparently, there has been a rumor out there that a certain rich man's property is being squandered by his manager. And he calls the manager in and he tells them he wants a strict accounting of all of that work that he's been doing for him, part of which, of course, was keeping the books, keeping track of the boss's money. Now, at no point in this story has the manager actually been fired, but we can hear he has certainly been put on notice. It would seem, at least to me, that this manager had felt quite secure in his position until that very moment, that out of the blue moment. Again, we are provided through this story yet another reality check. We have life and goods, talents and relationships, and we have time to manage. But we too are put on notice of our firing, And until we are reminded that our management is provisional, most of us can feel quite secure day to day. Thankfully, for most of us, our dismissal often also comes out of the blue. Well, as this manager contemplates his options as a potentially unemployed person, which at the moment seems fairly certain, he asks the same question that our farmer with the barns asked. He says, "What will I do?" But in this case, of course, he asks the question not because he has too much, but rather that he knows what he has will ultimately be taken from him. From my perspective, this guy seems a bit wiser. He knows that he does not really own anything. Of course, he could have said at that moment, well, life is short, make hay while the sun shines. Or since his things belong to a passing order of things in his mind, he could have decided to simply not pay any attention to them, to ignore them and become a Gnostic who believes that earthly goods and worldly kinds of things are really an impediment on the way to eternity. Or he could have thought that the only important thing in the future spiritual life is the future spiritual life, and that nothing we can do now is going to make any difference. So he could have just gone out there and sat in the wilderness alone, waiting to die. But our manager, he does none of those things. And this is where we begin to see one important element injected into this story. Perhaps, if you listen, it's a piece of wisdom, maybe just a little bit of advice. The manager decided that since he saw the handwriting on the wall about his job, he'd better start making some friends that would be there to support him in the coming years. So he began, person by person, reducing the debt that they owed to the boss. He used the authority that he still had in the present. Remember, he hasn't been fired yet. He used that authority as a tool to make friends for the future. Certainly a winning friends and influencing people strategy. Well, when the rich man found out about this ledger tampering, his money, he did not fly into a rage as we would have expected, right? Rather, he commended him as being shrewd, wise, prudent. Yet another surprising Jesus twist, and an invitation to us to be shrewd with money, possessions, authority, skills, all of our gifts, to use all that we have to make new friends for the sake of the future of God's kingdom, the future followers of Jesus. So, last February, along with 5 other people, including our bishop, visited Senegal, a West African country that is 95% Muslim. It was part of the Lutheran Global Engagement Ministries. Senegal, you may not know, is not a prosperous country. The remote areas are quite desolate and remote, and the people that live there can barely eke out a living. The purpose of our visit was to support and further engage in relationships, building friendships in areas of great need, and to observe firsthand what are the Lutherans actually doing out in the world. As I mentioned, most everyone we met were not Christians. But I have to tell you, every single person we met casually on the street, in organizations, whatever, they all knew who the Lutherans were. For we are known as the ones who initiated and continue to support micro businesses that allow farmers to run milk co-ops and make a real living, selling the milk from their cows that have been crossbred to double or triple the production. We are the ones, the Jesus followers, that support the schools that educate hundreds, if not thousands, of young people. We are the ones, the Jesus followers, that support the AIDS treatment centers, women's education, and youth centers that exist there in Senegal. Yes, it is the Lutherans in the world speaking the good news without using words, who make known all across the globe what a friend they have in Jesus. Making friends by shrewdly using our wealth and our resources. Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest cares for the elderly, the disabled, provides education for children, runs food pantries, provide homeless women safe sleep at night, license foster children. A $20 million nonprofit agency showing kindness, doing justice, and serving those in need, providing jobs for over 500 people in Arizona. Making friends by shrewdly using our money, our connections, and of course, our heart. And you may not know this, new people here may not be aware of this, but this very Ascension congregation has initiated or supported more than 23 different ministries at some level in the last 5 years, using your gifts, your resources out in the world for the sake of Jesus, including Lutheran Social Services and church-wide ministries. We definitely are doing more than simply enjoying each other's company and throwing social gatherings, though not only are they fabulous, they're really a lot of fun and necessary. But we are using our money and our benevolence to make a difference in people's lives out in the world. And we could do so much more. You've heard this. I'm going to repeat it again. The prediction that 40% of our churches will be closed in the next 10 or 20 years and perhaps sooner. And it's not because we lack funds. We are rich. The institutional church is rich. But until we listen to Jesus speaking to us today through such ancient stories, pleading with us to steward our resources out into the world of need, making friends for the sake of the good news of Jesus Christ, until we stop spending $40,000 on our electric bill or supporting and maintaining this enormous, though beautiful, building that is utilized 1 hour a week at 1/3 of its capacity. And until we start to evaluate and prioritize our spending and start using our great wealth this church has by shrewdly making friends for Jesus through ministries in the world that can be seen, touched, eaten, felt, and lived, until we do that, we are simply not doing enough. As your minister of word and service, as your deacon, I have to say that a little piece of me dies every time I think of what you and I could do in life-changing ministries with just half of the $40,000 a year. We cannot let the vision that God, through Christ, has for this world be doomed to echo in the halls of empty shells of giant church buildings. Jesus is very clear. How we use our wealth has everything to do with our faith. Love demands that we be shrewd planners for the kingdom that is now and not yet. For there may be no next generation of Ascension Lutheran Christians tomorrow if we ignore Jesus today. Amen.